name's Michael. Just graduated from the University of Brighton. So I'm very new to acoustic ecology, comparatively, so I've only really been studying it for a year or so, a couple of years. And this paper was submitted as my dissertation for my bachelor's. So sorry if I go over a lot of concepts that you're already familiar with, but it was kind of written so that anyone could read it, anyone with an interest. So it's called Schizophonia, Reconnecting to the Sonic Environment. And the paper explores the concept of schizophonia and its application within the practice of soundscape studies. So the term was coined by this guy, I'm sure you know, Arno Schaefer, in the 60s. And it refers to the split between an original sound and its electroacoustic transmission or reproduction. So Schaefer describes how all sounds were once original and unique, attached only to their source before the invention of sound recording. He says the 20th century has given us the ability to dissipate sound in time as well as space. This would be unnatural to anyone of a previous century. So the advance of recording technology gave positive and negative effects to the world soundscape, and the issue of schizophrenia is presented in science, society, and the arts, which are kind of the three original pillars of acoustic. I'm mostly going to look at the arts and the way it was reflected in different areas of soundscape study. So I'll start off talking about when schizophrenia was kind of first introduced. And you all know Schaefer likes to talk about the Industrial Revolution as kind of the starting point for the introduction of the lo-fi soundscape due to mass human interaction triggered by the development of mechanical manufacture, mass production, which led cities to be dense with factories and overpopulated. So the post-industrial city soundscape was increasingly lo-fi. The acoustic separation between urban and rural life had never been more prominent. This gave way to the electric revolution at the end of the 19th century and beginning of the 20th. During this industrial transition, it was when schizophrenia started to materialize, and this was most importantly with the inventions of the telephone, the phonograph, and the radio, which Schaefer pinpoints as the most revolutionary sound mechanisms of the 20th century. He says, with the telephone and the radio, sound was no longer tied to its original point in space, and with the phonograph, it was released from its time. So these inventions pinpoint the first instance in which sound could be physically separated from its original source and placed within a different context. So this introduced schizophrenia, where any sound could be recorded, mixed, and reproduced with the complete possibility of acoustic space. So the negative consequences of this were that you immediately lose a number of qualities that the original sound possessed. The recorded sound will never have the unique individuality of an original sound in its fundamental time and place, and the transfer of acoustic energy to electric suffers a reduction in audio quality. The introduction of these devices contributed to a lo-fi soundscape, especially regarding the poor signal processing of the early models. So Schaefer describes many individuals' reactions to these inventions as being negative. Here's one: it takes the whole of the music being played where you please, without distinction or discretion, lamentably distorted taboo, and chucks it into a space the land where it has no business to be. So that was about the radio. But there was lots of positive consequences, which obviously widely celebrated, coming from the arts mainly. So music, for example, was no longer restricted to the concert hall, could be experienced by a wider demographic, regardless of class or culture. And this changed the perception of music. It could be experienced at any time of the day, from the comfort of your home, and later on, anywhere. So this changed the way that music was also released and composed. It could contain any sound, given endless possibilities for composition. Which brings us to Soundscape composition, which of course wouldn't be possible without one of these schizophronic devices. So Pierre Schaeffer was among the first to utilize 20th century recording devices for experimental use of sound. He founded the GRM, Practice Music Concrete, employing reduced listening to remove a sound from its origin or source, converting it to a charismatic sound object that can be manipulated and arranged to form a composition. Stockhausen was also a member of the GRM, and he explains how they challenged the conventional approach to music composition by composing using the sounds themselves. The structure of a given composition and the structure of the material employed in it are derived from a single musical idea. So this influenced countless forms of music, including electronic music, which represents the complete transition of acoustic energy to electric energy, creating a new form of sound that exists on its own, completely removed from any original acoustic context. Another member of the GRM, FERRARI, took the idea of music in a different direction by taking the tape recorder outside. His compositions consisted of lengthy field recordings with little to no manipulation or electrical synthesis. So this kind of approach was the polar opposite of Stockhausen's reduced listening electronic vision. Despite arising from the same schizophrenic conditions, it inspired a completely different branch of composition. This kind of composition focused more on the selection and arranging of sounds as opposed to the creation of sounds themselves. So Hildegard Westkamp's approach to soundscape composition was a lot more personal and communicative. This is best displayed in Kids Speech Soundwalk in 1989, which explored the emotional significance of the sounds that she hears in a sample. Guides the listener through her emotional journey. So WESTERKAMP values the importance of clear communication between artist and listener. As she said, if we put out our recordings for actual information, then what are they? What's the message? So context is very important in Soundscape's composition, which kind of distinguishes it from just pure nature recording. Composers have the shared goal of understanding, highlighting, and questioning their sonic environments, and while adhering to that ambition, artists need to find their composer's voice. So Kids Speech Soundwalk and the work of FERRARI both represent like a location-specific sound events that are arranged into compositions, dislocating sound from their original time. But to look at works that dislocate sound from their original space, we look at transmission art. So the idea of broadcasting environmental sounds through the radio go back as early as the 20s and 30s. But, it was properly theorized with the World Soundscape Project in the 70s. So in 1975, Bruce Davis published a manifesto called Wilderness Environments. He proposes an imaginative use of the FM medium with the intention of expanding the acoustic horizons of listeners. Describes radio as a stream of background noise that simply provides an acoustic context to one's daily routines. Already it's become quite his proposal aimed to reverse the relationship between the listener and the radio station, introducing a concentrated state of listening that gives the listener a more active role. A continuous broadcast would feature spontaneous and unpredictable sounds, events that occur and change over time. One could make a virtually complete transition to the remote space and time scale of the wilderness region. So as the century progressed, artists found other ways to transmit environments, such as Bill Fontana's installations. Landscape Soundings in 1990, they transmitted natural sounds from the rural environment surrounding Vienna into the heart of the city. This work succeeded through the introspective use of memory and emotion, proving particularly popular with the local residents who recognize the sounds. As Fontana explains, my sound sculptures use the human and or natural environment as a musical information system for interesting sound events. Similarly to Westerkamp's work, context is fundamental. Which brings us to the 21st century. So when Schaeffer conceptualized schizophrenia, its intention was to create a sense of unease, to dramatize the aberration or effect of this 20th century development. The recording and reproduction of sound is now an unavoidable feature of everyday life. As Barry Truex commented in Acoustic Communication, schizophonia is an irreversible, inevitable fact of audio technology. Our concern with it will be to understand its implications, not condemn its existence altogether. So there is an infinite amount of acoustic content available, and it is presented to us such a volume that we have become reliant upon it to get through our daily routine. This is whether it's being unable to drive without listening to the radio, or walk to work without listening to music through headphones, or sleep without ambient music. So this came about from the rise of iPod culture, like the sign of the Walkman in the late 20th century, and it gave everyone the ability to dislocate themselves from their natural sonic environment, creating like a personal schizophrenia. The Bruce Davis's wilderness radio intended to provide an encapsulated experience through the natural rhythms of nature, while simultaneously reducing the compressed stream of lo-fi sound that was being produced by radio broadcasting. The key element of this proposal is the active role that the listener plays in the concentrated listening to the station. This is reflected in the personalized function of personal listening devices, people creating their own worlds. So in order for a sonic environment to retain the attention of a listener in the 21st century, it must be invited into their personal headspace through the use of appropriate context. This could be through personal expression, geographic location, or through the creation and interactivity of the user themselves. So it's through appropriate context and consideration of listener interaction that sound artists can engage with their audience and encourage the listener to consider their own role in the sonic environment. So I'll just finish on talking about a project that I worked on parallel to writing this paper. And I was working in an aquarium at the time and starting to think about the parallels between an aquarium and the concept of schizophrenia, where you take something from its natural context and environment and put it in a different context. And so I decided to do a project in the aquarium I was working at, like specifically. So I took a hydrophone and directional microphones and recorded the local environments that would house the kind of sea life that they had in the aquarium. And each of the sounds were specific to the range and natural habitat of the animals. So, for example, the ray tank I went to where you could see the local rays, areas to kind of put them back in their natural context. And the movement within the tanks as kind of an information source using a max MSP patch that followed the movement of the fish in their location. And I did have a video of some of these recordings, but it's not come through. So that about wraps me up. Any questions now? Yep.
Can we please use the microphone for the questions?
Is there any?
That one next to you. Yes.
I don't think it's on. Okay.
We don't have to. Okay. I was just, thank you for the presentation. Yeah, it would have been nice to hear and see the video, but maybe next time.
Yeah, sorry, the HDMI wasn't working. So.
Okay, but my question is about the concept, schizophonia. It has been debated and discussed, and maybe no better concept so far has been, except in Finland, at some point we were trying to introduce transphonia. Because it's, I think some people, well, I don't have a problem, and many others don't have a problem with the name schizophonia, but I think there is this, that it's actually referring to schizophonia, and maybe you could perhaps find a more neutral way to it has some, when you mention schizophrenia, there's immediately the feeling that there's something bad happening.
Yeah, that was kind of his original intention, but
yeah.
I guess now it's not really, it's not irreversible.
Yeah. What would you think about the concept transphonia?
I've not heard of transphonia. Could you expand on that a little?
Yeah.
I don't know, what is it?
It's just basically the same as schizophrenia, but it's more neutral.
Oh, just a different word for the phrase.
Yeah.
It's definitely nicer for sure. Because I mean, it came from schizophrenia, which is obviously has a lot of negative, like as soon as you hear anything bad. Yeah. So yeah, probably a different phrase is encouraged. Cool.
Can you tell us more about the actual installation setup?
Yeah, so I used the audio system that they already had, which was about 50 speakers, and it was very limited kind of what I could do sound-wise, because it was very like, they had 50 speakers, but they only had 6 channels, and they were all mono. So it was kind of 3 SD cards with a left and a right, and each one was going into different locations. So yeah, the setup was, it was kind of, my sound was played quite quietly, just to kind of be a background. But the reason I did it was because I was hearing the sounds that they were playing at the time, which was just awful. They just had like this kind of cartoony, repetitive music, and especially when you're working there, it's really gets in your head. So I was like, even if just for a day, if I could have some environmental sound, something that's at least relevant and appropriate. So yeah, that was, I just wanted it to be kind of a collaboration with like the sea life itself. Yeah.
So, sorry, I might have missed it. Did you do the recordings in the aquarium or in, in an area where the skates and rays would more?
Yeah, they're kind of in their natural habitats.
So where did you record them?
I originally wanted to go to some more exotic locations, but I was kind of, what I did was went around the Sea Life Centre and made notes of their habitats and ranges, so it was mostly like canals and rivers. So there was some areas where there'd be kind of local rays or like carp and stuff like that that could be found in surrounding areas, but then there was places like the rainforest area, which obviously that was not near a rainforest. So for that and other bits as well, I used kind of archives as like audio archives, implemented that a little bit. But yeah, I ended up with 6 15-minute compositions that were looped, and then they were, because they were manipulated by the movement of the sound, they all kind of blended into this ambient kind of environmental sound.
So there is no time for one question.
Thank you.
So good morning, my name is Carlotta Sillano, and I'm a PhD student at the University of Genova in Italy. And I'm doing a PhD in digital humanities, and I will present something that is related to my research project that is a multidisciplinary project that deals with the cultural geography, anthropology, and obviously soundscape studies. So there is why I'm here. And I will start for the fundamentals, so sorry if we go for something that you know. Landscape is usually intended as the main access key to the knowledge of a place, and the landscape is a complex and polysemic word with several definitions and meanings that changes based on context. It is defined and described as an art genre, a medium, a cultural construct, an economic device, and here there are just 4 definitions. There are 4 of the many possible. The first 2 are the first definition you find just typing landscape on Google, and are these 2. So Oxford English Dictionary says that landscape are all the visible features of an area of land, often considered in terms of their aesthetical appeal. For the Collins Dictionary, landscape is an extensive area of land regarded as being visually distinct. And then there is the definition of the European Landscape Convention, so an institutional definition. Landscape means an area as perceived by people whose features is the result of the action and interaction of nature and are human factors. And then there's a definition by George Simmel, that was one of the first philosophers to investigate this topic. And for him, landscape is an act of delimitation, a spiritual act for which the perceiving subject determines a separation, a subdivision in the infinite flux of nature. Reading this 4 definition and many others that I read, I found that they all have 2 common traits. The first one is that landscape is always a perceived object. I don't know if you agree, but I found this. So if we go back to the George Berkeley famous quotes, if a tree falls in a forest and no one is around to hear it, does it make sound? I don't know this, but if we go to another quiz, there is, if nobody is looking at the forest, does that landscape exist? I would say no. It exists only in the semantic relationship between the subject and its environment. If not, this landscape is just territory, probably. Another thing that was clear to me is that landscape is closely connected to the sense of sight. In this case, the eye takes possession of a portion of space, transforming it into a distinct and finished object, and so gaze places us before nature, as stated by Goethe in the Untitled. On the other hand, sound admits a perception of spaces that is both internal and intimate, and it is able to catch the immutability, fragmentation, and complexity of spaces, and more specifically of places that are described by human geography like emotionally lived spaces. Those generated by sound are meaningful maps that the result of bricolage tactics that go beyond the strategies of cartography, referring to the pseudo language in this case. Maps in which not only the physical and observable objects, but also the intangible daily transitory production which shape the segments of a coherent and organic reality. So sound is a perfect tool to capture the genius loci, or we could say the sense of place, or better, the spirit of a place. And this is what I like to do. And this experimentation is here connected to a specific place. I spoiled it. This space is the one of ALPS, or more specifically of Western ALPS, in the area I come from, basically. And also I think it's an interesting area because sound is a central element in the relationship between this peculiar mountain environment and its inhabitants. It is fundamental in the definition of the orientation map, in the construction of the cultural identity, and in everyday experience, where the vertical and unpredictable morphology of the territory creates a visual obstacle. Sound crosses the cliffs, allowing communication, knowledge, and representation. And ALPS has been told and represented in the last 3 centuries through the most diverse languages and forms, crystallizing each time in different narrative topos. There are also narrative places. And I think I went too far with this icon things, so sorry. But anyway, yeah, the history of the Alpine storytelling goes from the topos of ALPS as a garden to the one of ALPS as a favorite scenario for mountain heroism climbers and explorers and all these other things, the height of romantic authors. In all these narrations, there is a common trait. There is always a constant negative judgment about progress and economic evolution, and this is something that we talked a lot about yesterday too. And this narration fosters a traditional imaginary in which past is always better than present. And also in the sonic field, ALPS are usually conceived and imagined as a pastoral and immaculate environment, so a high soundscape, we say. ALPS, anyway, are not crystallized in a romantic past of rural beauty. Also, this word came back many times yesterday, romantic. And climate changes, digital technologies, new form of tourism are radically transforming this territory. Sounds allows, in my opinion, to understand this alteration, translating them into sensible data. And the ambition of this research is to communicate a neutral and contemporary image of the Alpine territory. So there is no judgment in my research. I just want to take a picture through sound. And in the realm of cultural geography, sound and listen can become tools for a new kind of investigation of places. And what I would like to do is to create a wide narration that is complete, also if it is arbitrary and empirical, of the place itself. So not sound for sound's sake, but sound as an instrument for a wider storytelling that is geographical, anthropological, semiotic, and pretentious to these areas. The last purpose, so, is the evaluation of some form of multimedia storytelling based on the use of digital tools and the determination of and application of a narrative mode that dismantles the primacy of sight and is based on sound and listening. And this research proceeds by case study. And for these case studies, I would like to create a different tale with different tools. I'm still working on this, so I don't know. But I will present one of these case studies, and this is the one. The first one I went through, so it's my patient zero, we could say, and it's related to a small hamlet, very tiny hamlet, situated in Piedmont, in the Valle region of Valsesia, that is on Pennine Alps. And this hamlet was founded in 1255 by the Valser, a population coming from the German-speaking area of the Canton Valais in Switzerland. And this hamlet is part of the municipality of Rimella that includes other 13 hamlets distributed on an altitude range that goes from 1,000 to 1,400 meters above the sea level. And this hamlet is the last one you can reach. And in this place, the Valser gave life to a unique culture that survived through centuries, thanks to isolated location of the village, the absence of mass tourism and of tourism at all, I would say, and above all, the exclusive use of an Alemannic dialect that is called the Tichu Rimellese. And this is the hamlet with its vernacular architecture. You can reach it through a road that was completed in the 90s. So before the 90s, you had to walk for some hours to reach it. And now you can reach parking, and then you have to walk for some 100 meters through a path that was recently restored by the FAI, that is the Italian National Trust, to say. This place is, so it's like an island, and an island is a perfect lab for researcher, and many anthropological and linguistic researches went on in this place. There is also a local research initiative that born there in 1988, and they published a periodical focusing on local culture. And recently also some movie where we used this place as a location. This documentary by this filmmaker, Austrian filmmaker called Hannes Lang, was filmed there. So it's a place that is like attracting the attention.
Sorry, could someone please close the curtains? We can't see the smoke.
I don't know how to do it. You have to. So the green screen is not
Should be enough.
So the rich purpose of studies about San Gottardo and Rimelda misses a specific focus on the relationship between the inhabitants of the hamlet and their landscape and soundscape. And the aim of this research was to start this exploration, gathering information and stories related to the acoustic universe of the village. And in undertaking this research, I explored the archives and interviewed the inhabitants of San Gottardo, trying to encourage their acoustic memories. And the first analyzed level was connected to the morphology of the territory and to the landmarks used by the inhabitants of San Gottardo to build their orientation map. And this chapel was very interesting because of its dedication. It's a chapel that is dedicated to this was Madonna del Rumore, that translated is Our Lady of the Noise. It's quite a unique name. In Italy is unique. Search it and it's unique. And it's quite frequent on ALPS to find names that are related to natural elements like Our Lady of the Snow or the roses or the milk too. But such a direct reference to soundscape is quite unusual. And this chapel stands at the convergence of a rushing mountain stream and the river and the valley floor. They're called Landwasser and Enderwasser, I hope to pronounce it well. And in this point, the waters of the two rivers blend and echo loudly. And this church is a limen, we could say. It traces a first dichotomy in the map of the locals, the one between the inner and outer territory. And it marks the moment when, climbing down from the valley, the inhabitants leave a landscape of harmony and silence, entering the one of different and unknown sounds. Another dichotomy in this place is in time and not in space, and is the one between the two main seasons, right? Basically two seasons, the one winter and summer, and for sure winter is a season of snow and silence. Springs are one of the keynotes in the soundscape of San Gottardo, and only snow in winter sometimes manages to mute this sound, isolating and trapping the village into unreal silence. And according to people from San Gottardo, all winter sounds are related to snow. They are the crackles of their own steps, like the one we heard in the chapel composition on the first day here, and or the disturbing noises of the avalanches that are an important sign of danger when someone is outside a village. And the snow also reveals new sound, like the bells of near villages that are not hearable in the other parts of the year. And on the contrary, the long silence is opposite to the pastoral, the long winter, sorry, is opposite to the pastoral sound made of song and voices. And the ascent to the pasture take place in June, and the return is at the end of September, so it just happened. And during summer, cowbells resonate in the valley, while vocals and voices and songs spread from the pasture that punctuate the mountains all around. And voices are the only mean of communication, because all these factors are not visible. So it's something really important. And the inhabitants has a sort of secret code in Ticcio-Rimelese, that is the language they use to talk also today. And for example, this Hamet Halfo is a signal of danger, and it corresponds to a high-pitched call repeated rhythmically. On the other side, the Ruzzo is a call of love and joy. And I had the possibility to talk with one of the old ladies that lives in this village, and she made me listen to a vine, some Swiss researcher recorded in the 70s, and this vine is about her voice, and it's like a popular song translated into Ticcio-Rimelese, and this famous Ruzzo.
Ecco qui sto cantando Susanna.
Susanna m'affetta, Susanna m'affetta, margata su, un bagno tu giorni dai, Susanna tu giorni dai, e tu che un cugno del penne dei sotto, un cugno del penne dei sotto, che tu trovo, trette soldi in Geru, trette soldi in Geru, che scappo, oh, vina,
So language is something is a big part of the soundscape of this place, and so I will tell something about this. Ticcio-Rimelese is a Nademanic dialect derived from the ancient Alto German and transmitted orally, just orally, for about 7 centuries. The few written documents in Ticcio dates back to the beginning of the 20th century, and so it's not easy to build like a vocabulary and a grammar of this language. And referring to Derrida's idea of logocentrism, we could say that it's a language that exists in the present of its enunciation. While talking in Ticcio, natives communicate an unmediated idea of their work, where there is no difference between thought and sounds, or maybe there are some differences, but few differences. The sound is not out of time, but it happens in the present together with its language. And many initiatives are taking place in view of preserving this linguistic heritage, and so there are some sound archives, and also there are some classes. I attended one, but it's really difficult to teach this language because there isn't a grammar, and so it's impossible to define some rules. Just people who is talking this language know it, and there are few people that is still talking it, so probably it will disappear somewhere. Another level of sound is the one of objects, but I don't know if we have time to analyze it. Anyway, bells are really important because public lighting arrived just in the 90s in the village, so they are an orientation signal, and also working tools as another interesting sound levels because they create a complex rhythmical environment, and they generate like a fractal score in which each cycle contains another cycle. This community, as I said before, for ALPS, but we can apply to this specific case, is not crystallized in a fest of struggle and beauty. Something is happening. Landscape is transforming due to the population, bringing new sounds. Technologies, new technologies that are light and invisible, finally enter the village, so are the first technologies that enter in contemporary with the rest of the world, probably. And the new forms of tourism are arriving because many institutions are investing in these hamlets, trying to confer it touristic vocation that is quite refused by the inhabitants. There are 9 today. And in undertaking this search, I was particularly interested in learning how new technologies are modifying the perceptive and productive patterns of the inhabitants, but I understood that the echo that is transforming the hamlet is not one of technology, but one of weekenders that are going there. And I understood that there isn't a tourism that is interested in the aura of authenticity that this place has. And some of the inhabitants explained me that probably the reason of this is that their life is not an historical reenactment. They are not displaying their culture. They just live it. So they are like stuck in a contemporary past, we could say. And they don't like this new form of tourism. And Elena, that is one of the ladies I met there, told me that she prefers to live in the past where she can play her horn.
Aspettate un attimo che trovo la posizione giusta. L'altro taglio lo potrei. Però il porto giusto è essere umido e secco.
Generate multimedia tapes based on sound and listening and able to represent and tell the sense of place. The project is to collect those tapes in a sort of sound atlas of Western Alp. Maybe we change the name because it's a little bit pretentious. But the atlas is again a device of vision, I know. It allows, however, the organization of materials that are not necessarily visual, becoming, as for Dieburg, an instrument of individual and collective knowledge. Through a re-functionalization, the atlas can become a useful tool to display these stories, because it does not impose a chronology, and it allows the synoptic and synchronic exposure of materials, suggesting a personal and subjective exploration of the whole picture. The result would be a personal map and together a story of the Western Alps that could be able to trace some invisible paths in the geography of these places. Thank you for listening.
Yeah, 5 minutes for questions.
I have a hint or some idea. Maybe it's inconsistent, I don't know, but in Jamaica they started some 20 years ago a memory bank for stories and for sounds. I don't know what still is up there in terms of this institution. I think a kind of memory bank, auditory memory bank should be something. Is there an institutionalization which is inside or some
I don't know. For now, I think it's a subjective aspiration, and I don't think I will create an archive or something like this. But I really don't know. It's a work in progress, so it depends on the kind of tapes that I will collect, and I would like to use different kind of narrative modes and different tools, different instruments. So I don't know if we could arrive to a final form. There is like that could be categorized and collected into an archive. I don't know, but it's like there aren't projects on the ALPS that are linked to Soundscape. So I think it's the first one that would be
a transnational European Union funding thing, you know. Because if you have finished your PhD, then it's gone.
Yeah. I don't know. Okay, I will see. And thank you for this. I will check the Jamaica project. Thank you so much.
How much time did you spend in this village?
I've been there several times because just a personal note. My father is an architect and he is working in that place at the moment for a project that is a national project to restore it. So I visited the first time, I think, in 2010, and I went there many times during these years.
Maybe you were the first.
Who wants? Okay.
The people in the village have any idea of plans about the future, what they would
yeah, this is one
of the village?
This is one of the problems, because they refuse changes, basically, and they refuse this institutional intervention. But they are 9 people, many of them are old, so there is one young lady that is 24 years old, and she lives there, and she works in a modern bistro that was built in the old elementary school. So these are the kind of changes that are going on, but I don't know if it's right to refuse this kind of intervention or not. Probably if they refuse it, it will just disappear and the village will be abandoned, but also gentrification, I don't know, it's a good solution for them, so yeah, this is not something I can judge. I just want to listen to their stories. Yeah.
Thank you so much. It's very interesting what you are doing, and yeah, I think it's just fascinating this what you were mentioning about the secondary housing and tourists and their demands and the religious ideas. What would they like to have in their soundscape, and we met very similar kind of discrepancies when in the study acoustic environments and change. You know that the book, but there was one article about the Italian village Cembra, following from the world soundscape. And there's somebody, maybe as a tip, I would mention the name of Nora Wickman. She has studied quite profoundly the village of Cembra and their struggle with how to attract tourists, how to eat the cake and keep it at the same time.
Yeah, yeah, okay. I will talk with you.
I just want to say what an amazing piece of work you're doing. Very vivid, very well framed conceptually. And I think the only challenge then is, perhaps as you intimated, how to sort of package the results in a mode that is.
Yeah, and also I have not so much time because I am in the second year of my PhD, and so as I told, I knew this reality and I went in this village many times, but I would like to give other takes about other places, and I don't know how many I will have the time to analyze, and if I will be able to go in depth.
Well, I mean, there are, like in terms of, say, a map, there's very interesting historical mapping ideas. Yeah. Like, for example, from Italy, like the first pilgrims maps that were written are very subjective interpretations of the landscape you have to traverse on your pilgrimage.
Yeah.
Anyway,
we need to stop here.
Okay, I will contact you because it's my area of research.
Okay,
currently.
We can talk later.
So yeah, there's some good models.
Yeah. Also, thank you very much.
Thank you. Just want to take a second to thank the organizers of this conference and for the opportunity to come and be with friends and colleagues. It's always really fantastic, and I'm always grateful to those that put everything together. So thank you for your efforts in that. To those that are in the room, my name is Suzanne Thorpe. I'm a PhD candidate at University of California, San Diego, so I've traveled a little bit of a way to get here. I'm very appreciative. So let's get started. In his 2002 essay, Paradise, Nature, and Reconciliation, musicologist Richard Leppard traces nature-human dualisms illustrated by Wagner, Puccini, Adorno, and the Ronettes. Wagner, Leppard writes, was in communication with philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer about his song cycle, The Ring. From these communications, Leppard summarized that Schopenhauer, quote, recognized in music the sonoric trace of a wholeness and a creative force upon which life itself depends. However, despite Schopenhauer's passionate testimony to music's creative vitality, he still framed it as a representation, a vision of a paradise firmly believed in, yet ever distant from us. In other words, human reconciliation with nature was, according to Leppard, a utopian goal for Schopenhauer, an experience that, quote, we believe but cannot reclaim for lived experience, unquote. Now, I disagree with Mr. Schopenhauer, as I believe the vibratory effect of musicking is the experience of generative creativity we know as nature, happening within us and does not need to be reclaimed. However, our habits of being in the world in a bifurcated ontology that reinforces representational modes of perception obfuscate the experience. Now, by bifurcated or binary ontology, I refer to a way of being in the world that assumes divisions figuring subject-object, nature-human, and natural-cultural as separate entities. This universal Eurocentric humanist view of the world, as critical theorist Rosi Braidotti calls it, denies human bonds to materiality and establishes a hierarchical position of the human. Bifurcations, in turn, disassociate human entanglements and correlating responsibilities, with not only the natural environment, but also emerging complications arising from increasing geo, socio, and political complexities. Braidotti and anthropologist Andrew Pickering, whom we'll hear more from going forward, advocate for a turn or return to non-binary states, for it is from here, they believe, we can negate consequences of othering. They invoke philosophies of vital materialism and emergent systems theory to render becoming and relational perception, ways of being they deem necessary to disrupt dualistic thinking. But cultures steeped in centuries of bifurcation need active affirmations of interdependent generative processes, and, as ecofeminist Val Plumwood states, it should happen in many cultural fields. And so I turn to musicking, specifically site-situated sound works, and their ability to be creative by and emphasize relational perception. Going forward, I'll discuss the roles of listening and digital media in creating site-situated sound works that raise awareness of relational becoming. I will reference research and data gathered from two of my own works, Listening Is as Listening Does and Resonance and Resemblance, and engage philosopher theorist Jean-Luc Nancy, Rosi Braidotti, and anthropologist Andrew Pickering along the way. Through these findings and theorists, I speculate that contextualizing what we hear with the aids of digital media in environmentally in situ compositions, a conscious experience of the world as generative and entangled arises. No idea why there's two X's there, but apparently they don't like these images, or this PowerPoint is so use your imagination for images that convey representation and relation. Before launching into examples, I'd like to expand on why I focus on site-situated sound to articulate relational perception. Music frequently embraces the natural world in its interpretations and imitations, but it often features it as an object separate from humans, something to control or fear, love or revere. Familiar examples from the Western art canon include Ferd Groff's Grand Canyon Suites, a depiction of an awe-inspiring nature, or Amy Beach's Hermit Thrush at Morn, an affectionate ode to a hermit thrush. Both sonify nature, which is an inaction of nature in itself, but they are rendered as representations, reifying habits of bifurcation. A site-situated work, on the other hand, arises with an environment in itself as the work is intentionally in dialogue with place. The compositions are relational results of their ecological interaction, as opposed to a separate representation of the natural world. Relationally arising compositions produce what Andrew Pickering calls a, quote, ontological theater, unquote, a focused enactment of dynamic systems in performance with one another. For Pickering, an ontological theater is an experience of, quote, a non-modern ontology, which he sees as a lively place of performatively interacting in endless emergent systems, of which we humans are just one sort. This is in contrast to what he calls a modern ontology, which produces a vision of the material world as disconnected and passive, waiting for human agents to represent it. Site-situated works assume a non-modern ontology and stimulate our sense of lively, interconnected dynamism. Now let's move on to effective methods to emphasize this dynamic, first of which is listening. In listening, we tune into the vibratory character of things, as sound's oscillating waves reveal a thing's material makeup in its speed, frequency, and timbre. This energy, in its unique molecular form, somatically interpolates with us to combine with our own vibratory being in resonance. To listen, as philosopher Jean-Luc Nancy notes, is to enter a spatiality by which we are at the same time within and without sounds, as it, quote, opens up in me as well as around me, and from me as well as towards me, unquote. In listening, we are resonating or resounding. In resonation, we become an expression of the interaction between the initial sonic impulse and its receivers. In listening, we experience sound's generativeness, a quote, reprise of a present that has already passed, and a reopening of the present still to come, unquote. Now, this state of listening makes what Nancy calls an ontological ascent into a subject that is not a subject at all, but a body of resonance in infinite tension and rebound. A listening body is a body becoming with its environment, resonating in a continuous state of differentials between changing variants, inside and out. Thus, in listening, we are the non-modern ontology Pickering refers to. Generative dynamic bodies arising in relation to the heterogeneous forms around and within us. The listening techniques I personally employ are in part adopted from my study with American composer Pauline Oliveros in her deep listening practice. I also incorporate technology in my listening practice. With various sensors such as transducers or electrophysiological monitors, analysis tools such as spectral analysis software, we have access to a wealth of data regarding the presence and character of sound, its interactions in acoustic space, and the bodies therein. So now let's look at some examples of how listening and tech contribute to our ontological theater. I'll start with Listening Is as Listening Does, which is a piece I composed for Paramore Center Music and Arts, inaugural sound art exhibition in the Garden of Sonic Delights. Composed to highlight the plight of local bats, this piece simulates sonar, a system of navigation bats used to determine the location of objects via reflected sounds. As I listened in the Spanish courtyard that you see here, where many bats lived, I discovered the wonderful reflective qualities of the slate floor and swirled concrete walls. To create the sonar effect, I mounted microphones in the courtyard under these speaker systems to listen for echoes of specific reflective frequencies. Using Max MSP, I detected and analyzed echoes in real time, influenced by the fluctuating inhabitants and materiality of the environment. Once analyzed, the software produced musical responses accordingly, generating the composition in relation to the activity of the environment. The sonification of changes was subtle, as was the piece in its entirety, which matched the behaviors of the occupants, human and non-human, in the place. This enabled participants to slip into a contemplative state of listening that illuminated a process of environmental entanglement in real time. And with digital technologies, our musicking highlighted a real-time assemblage of many gentle actors, not just that of sound performers and composers. The binary of composer-performer was blurred by the animal activity and reflectiveness of the materials of the space, and preconceived notions of the courtyard and its inhabitants as static bystanders were challenged. We can have a listen. resonance and resemblance, a 50-minute sonic meditation I created for designer Russell Wright's 79-acre woodland garden Manitoba in Garrison, New York. The piece had 2 phases, a guided sound walk around the woodland, followed by a sonic meditation at a quarry pool, which is, the quarry pool is what you see here. The sonic meditation featured 4 recorder players and kayaks within the pool, and myself on shore on electronics performing a fixed improvisation. To give rise to our ontological theater, I incorporated improvisatory techniques in the score and included listening engagements. In fact, listening became the primary building tool and foundational premise of the score in its entirety. To deepen my listening experience in the environment, I used technology. These included impulse responses, field recordings, and spectral analysis. With them, I had highly focused knowledge of the sonic characteristics and behaviors and determined methods to fold those findings into the score and the live performance. For example, I initiated impulse responses on the in the quarry pool. With them, I discovered that ranges of 1,000 to 5,000 hertz were most noticeably productive. These frequencies reflected sharply off of the granite and water and displayed a high potential to produce interesting sonic effects, such as difference tones. They also excited wildlife inhabitants whose chatter increased noticeably when those ranges were present. With spectral analysis, I analyzed and observed the strong, consistent presence of frequencies relative to the pitches D, E, G, and B. These findings suggested that these pitches could stimulate sympathetic resonances in the environment and so became the basis of the fixed improvisation. After identifying effective frequency ranges and promising resonant frequencies, I settled on the recorder as the instrument of choice for its ability to match those parameters and its simple waveform. I also folded my findings into an electronic component of the score. I strategically placed 5 speakers to reflect off of the granite and water. Using my established range and frequencies as foundational pitches, I projected short, close sine tones around the quarry, which entangled with each other in the sonic ecology in their reflections and produced bright instances of fluttery vibrato. To further engage listening, I included listening activities for participants in the score. These consisted of a 20-minute sound walk and text-based listening meditations. Focused on the stimulating liveliness of sound, participants tuned into the vibratory inaction inside and around themselves and became extremely aware of the interplay of the many actors in their environments. So, listen to sample. effect of resonance and resemblance was evidenced in a post-performance survey I distributed to participants. Out of 130 participants, approximately 20% responded. The questionnaire included the following. Did a focus on listening change how you experienced the environment? Did the music affect how you experienced the environment? And did your experience of your body in the environment change during the event? Out of the sample, 100% strongly agreed that a focus on listening changed how they experienced the environment. 100% also stated that they agreed that musicking affected how they experienced the environment. And 66% said that they felt a moderate to strong change in how they experienced their body in the musicking environment. Some interesting quotes that descriptive responses to the questions included the following. In a little time, sounds all around, near and far, became interconnected and seemed to respond to each other. I was more aware of not only the external environment, but my internal and their interplay. The music provided a center around which the environment became a constellation of sounds. I felt that the music, added to the experience, became part of the external and internal. There was a sense of the body losing itself in the music and sounds, then coming back to itself with more focus and attention than before. I could feel the sensation of sounds within me, and my breath became a collaborator. I heard my own body vibrate. Listening is, as listening does, in resonance and resemblance. We have examples of how listening and listening with digital tools can craft sonic entanglements with environments that are dynamic and generative, especially when those processes are contextualized with place engaged in real time. These site-situated soundworks provided an expanded ability to offer humans active affirmations of our interdependent generative processes. The experience of relational becoming was relayed in the surveys, which indicated that the activity of focused listening and changed participants' experiences of themselves and their environment. Immersed in the vibrancy of sound, some forgot themselves, their boundaries, and heard their own vibrational evolution in environmental collaboration. I interpret these descriptions as initiating what Braidotti terms a, quote, affirmative bond that locates the subject in the flow of relations with multiple others, unquote. This is needed to form what she calls a non-unitary subjectivity, which rests on an ethics of becoming, and I argue can be achieved with an emphasis on relational perception. A non-unitary subjectivity proposes an enlarged sense of interconnection between self and others. In the pieces previously described with the enhanced hearing of digital media, participants slipped into the stream of their own being and developed awareness and affinities with the many beings in their surroundings. In listening to the call and response of sonic bodies, they experienced the resonant materializing of an intermaterial world, relationally co-constructed amidst its own ecology. This experience noticeably destabilized habits of human-centeredness among us and proved to successfully diffuse, at least temporarily, our binary bound being. Thank you.
So, and for the last time for this session, 5 minutes of questions.
Yes.
I'm still formulating this in my head, but I like the notion of relational becoming. At the same time, in my head, I feel there's a dichotomy then between being present, because somehow relational still applies other. Like to have relationship defines at least two entities. And so at the same time, I feel that the power of what you're saying comes in the notion that the other disappears, right? That the ego disappears, that the body disappears, and that you're present in a different way. And so I'm just wondering if you could, if I'm right, if you could tease that out.
Sure, we can try to tease that out. So I tend to, okay, sorry, let me gather my thoughts here. The process of one can, sorry, completely blanking on the name of the process that I want to reference. And it will come to me. Sorry.
You can tell me later.
Yeah, I can tell you later. It's completely escaping me what I want to reference. Yes, let me move on, and I might come back to that.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay.
It's a bit in response to the question.
Yeah.
I think the effect of what you're trying to obtain, the idea of losing the ego and becoming conscious of what is going on, of all the other sounds and of the other players. It's important to realize that it's about losing your own ego in an activity. So it's an active process. And that's why I don't think it's a real contradiction. You're still remaining active. It's a performance, and that's because otherwise it always remains, if you think about it afterwards, in reflection, it always remains a contradiction. But if you're in the action, I don't see it as a contradiction. Just because you're active and you can still, especially as a performer, you can still choose to, you still have your own individuality, and at the same time you can still choose to perform within the environment and in the environment together with the environment. But yeah.
Well, so what you're referencing is that the ongoing activeness, right, the generativeness, right? So and most relational theory, right, actually acknowledges the ongoing activeness and that nothing is actually in stasis, right? So I think the concept of other still is maybe something that we are subjectively attached to, right? And that the process of becoming is always, though, in conjunction with what is around us. So I'm wondering if there isn't a semantic issue involved in what you're trying to access as well. Yes?
Maybe there is nothing around us. You are creating boundaries with this thinking and with this speaking.
Well, and that's what I'm sorry.
I'm not
completely
ready.
spacing on
okay,
what I want to reference to address to GARD, and it's actually addressing this, and it's
so it occurs
very,
to me
very
when listening and seeing what you presented here is the question, where's the place where is this all happening you describe?
The place is ongoing, right?
I mean, in the moment there is an impulse,
right.
And there is a space where the sound will be heard, and it's us who is listening to. This is one level of kind of description. But if you go on in listening, I would lose everything. I would lose even being aware of sitting there or listening. So I would lose all this. I do this. I lose when I indulge in those sounds in those areas. So the question is, we should be very modest and subtle in dealing with words, describing those moments. We are on the scientific level here, that's true, and this wants to be said, that wants to be spoken out, and wants to have emotions and umbrellas. It wants to have an understanding, but all of these is beyond understanding. It's not about thinking, it's not about reflecting.
Well, I think it's more about doing, actually. And that's actually what I'm trying to get at here. It's in the generativeness, and it is actually in the doing that we're able to access this particular activity. And the process that I was trying to get at is autopoiesis.
Oh, sure.
And the openness for closure idea. So that, I think, leaves a little bit of room, right? That idea of acknowledgement of something outside of any entity, whether it be myself or something in myself. You know, the concept of autopoiesis, I think, and the concept of openness for closure allows for the existence of boundaries, but those boundaries can be porous.
Oh, we'll have to take that up, because autopoiesis is by definition a self-generating, self-sustaining system, right?
To not miss other stuff here, because we are already ahead. Time frame. I'm sorry for this.
Yep, no
Thank
worries.
you very much.
Okay,
I hope you find it helpful.